Dennis, I want to thank you so much for being with us here at KoSA. We're celebrating this year our 20th anniversary, of course, and we've had so many of the great drummers, everybody from Neil Peart to Steve Smith. I mean, we've had everybody here, and one of the only few people missing here was you. Finally, you're available, and I want to thank you for joining us. What's really important for us, I'd like to get your. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Like, of course, many people know you're playing. They've seen you in many different contexts, but talk about. You're really comfortable in a jazz idiom, playing really light, or playing John Scofield, or playing whatever style. How does one prepare for that? Did you prepare to play so many different styles and be so comfortable in them?
Well, first I'd like to start off by saying thank you for having me here. It's everything like you said. It's very peaceful out here and very relaxing. The only thing it's just hard for me to get through is the classes in the morning. It kind of kills me.
Well, we can change the clock for the next time.
Right.
Yes, change
You
the
may have
schedules.
to.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
But how do one prepare for, or how do I prepare for those things? Well, first of all, I grew up in a household that my mom, she's a big fan of music, and she listened to all styles of music. And me becoming or wanting to become a musician, I thought that was the norm. You had to learn all styles of music, at least get the basics of it. Because one never master any style of music, because every 10, 15 years it changes. And a lot of times, as you know, or as we know, it's a big circle of things that to happen. Like for instance, like now, the rappers, or so forth, since the rappers came along, what they do is sample a lot of the old stuff and put a fresh beat on it, and it becomes something new to them. But to us, it's the same old thing. Jazz is just, for me, it's just understanding the concept of what that entails. What you have to do to play that music. First you have to learn how to play a dotted eighth note an even dotted eighth note on the rod cymbal, and keep time with the hi-hat, and your left hand and if you're a right-handed player, your left hand, answers to the right, but very in a tasteful fashion. And sometimes, it all depends on what style of jazz you're playing. Sometimes you feather eighth note on the bass drum, or if you're playing in like a triplet form like Alvin, well then that's an answer and call thing between the hi-hat and the kick drum, just like the answer and call between the right hand and the left hand. Right.
And then when you're learning music, for example, if someone comes to you with new music, and of course you're in the music or in the band or in the project because they want you, who has your voice, Dennis Chambers, playing that music. How do you go about learning new music, a new project?
How do I go about it is normally the writer sends me a tape or CD of the music, with a sequencer track on it, with sequence drums on it as well. And they say, like, by all means, disregard the drums. We want you to do what you do, come up with, what you come up with. And if we don't like it, we may throw in some ideas. Or, we make suggestions, And that's how it happens, for me. And I was always blessed, in the last 25 years, maybe 30 years now, or maybe 35 years, is to play with musicians that allow you to express yourself instead of having a musician, trying to turn you into their personal drum machine. And I hate that, where, especially when things don't work out, then the guy's coming to you, he's talking to you like you came up with this idea. It's like, wait a minute, I only did what you asked me to do, But
right. No, that's interesting. I mean, but if you're learning, let's say you had a student come up and say, how do I learn this music or some music? What's the first approach? How would you do it? Yes. No. The other question was valid, and it's great.
Yeah, but I
because-
see where you're
Yeah.
going with this. My approach is, first of all, since I play a melodic instrument, I play bass and I play a little bit of keyboards. So for me, it's like I learn the bass parts.
So you actually learn the bass part of
Yeah,
that song.
I mean, and
Right.
mentally, and that way I know where the changes are and when they come up, and also it helps me to memorize the accents
Okay.
or the phrasings of certain things, that helps. And I really strongly suggest that anybody that play drums should learn how to play a melodic instrument, keyboards, marimbas, whatever, a melodic instrument, especially keyboards. The keyboards is like the center point of all the instruments. If you want to, show somebody or show a guitar player the chords, well, that's your right hand. You want to show the bass player the bass notes, well, that's your left hand. And it's a very percussive instrument too. So if you had some idea of rhythms, you can tap it out, on a keyboard or a piano, and tap out sort of sketch an idea of what you want, and go from there. Horns, same thing with the horn players. With the keyboards, or a guy who plays a keyboard, he can tell, the woodwind or the horn section what to play, and what voicings and how it works, or how to, make up voicings that that what makes sense to him in his music.
Right. No, that's true. And myself, I was a rock drummer first, and I studied classical percussion, and with some great teacher. I mean, Pierre Belize was my mentor, and I tell everyone, you really should, because not only do you learn sensitivity, nuance, the art of making music with these instruments, but the whole melodic approach, which then transfers to the drums, and the drums is a melodic instrument also.
Yeah, and also it helps you to it gives you a whole nother way of looking at how to play the drums too.
Exactly. Another question. You, and I noticed this when you were playing the other night with Francesco Beccato in the rhythm section in your concert. You love doing when there's a groove going on, or a vamp perhaps, and you're soloing over it, and then you leave like the timeline, and you do like polyrhythms over that. And that's such a beautiful thing, and the tension release thing. How would you suggest to somebody, a student or other people who are wanting to play like that or experiment in that? How do you practice that?
Well, first of all, you have to have a great or good bass player to keep time, because now he's your time now. And then once you establish, like if the guy have great time, and you put your trust in him, then I'll go into drifting into different time signatures, and not only different time signatures, but in different beats, pulses. I mean, so it's like pulse modulations.
Right.
Yeah.
And you were superimposing other types of groups. Yeah.
Like for instance, like I like to play over. Like I'm a big fan of Mahavishnu and Billy Cobham and Tony Williams with Lifetime and Mahavishnu. So, with John's writing, John McLaughlin, who is a dear friend of mine, he's like a brother to me now, and his writing, it was very interesting, to dig into that music. And, I can hear, since I'm a guy who plays a melodic instrument, I can hear the melodies of him playing certain things, but then also I can feel where the time is. Like some stuff he's written is in 21s or 15s or 16s, and though it's interesting with John, because he don't subdivide a lot of stuff. He counts them straight out.
Okay. Wow.
Which is weird, because I can't watch his feet, because his feet is going double time faster than what the thing really is, because he's counting full 15s or 21s. But meanwhile, the thing is going by, and you have your way of doing it. Like for instance, like when I was talking to Billy said something about one tune. I asked him about this one tune. I think it was Dance of Meyer, or I think it was Dance of Meyer. And the way he counts it is totally different than the way John counts it. And somehow, both of them were right.
And it works.
But one would say the other one is wrong, and the other one would say the other one is wrong. But the end result, or at the end of the day, they were both right because they both ended up at the same place. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's and another question I have for you, when you're preparing or keeping in shape, this is another question. We always get the question.
I look like I'm in shape.
Actually, you're looking very good. And
You should have saw me a couple of months ago.
I heard. Yeah. And I was looking forward to seeing, because someone asked me, he says, like, are you sure he's okay? I said, absolutely. I've been speaking to him. He sounds great. And I mean, now I have to see him because, he had lost a lot of weight. And yeah, but, we all go through some things and then we get back and then we get back on our tracks. So we can confirm. He's in good shape, right? Yeah. Yes.
Well, it's interesting. When I had my mishaps, my misfortune, people have written me off as like, my wife was telling me when she boarded the flight to go to see me, when she found out what happened, they already pronounced I was dead.
So I heard, right?
And
wow.
My wife got on a plane, not knowing what to expect when she got to the other end. And when she came to the hospital, of course, I was laying up in a coma, but I was still alive. So when I came out of the coma, she told me what happened. I'm like, well, wait a minute. I had to pinch myself just to make sure I'm alive first. And I'm like, well, I'm here. So then I had to get on the internet and say, like, hey, wait, everybody, I'm still alive. I'm still kicking,
Good news. He's okay.
Right.
But also the other kind of shape, musically speaking, do you do a warm-up or just from the physical point of view before doing a concert?
Good question. This is something I learned from, watching Buddy Rich and talking to Buddy Rich at a very young age. Buddy didn't do a lot of warm-ups, hardly any. He believed in letting the hands fall where they may. I mean, and I think that had to do with a lot of his way of playing, and also his concept of playing, which is practicing on pillows. It's like if you practice on pillows, the muscles are already warmed up. You condition yourself to the thing where it's like every time you sit down and play, you're just ready to go. Right.
But you'd practice pillows before playing. So
I
you do
used to
some
practice
kind of
pillows when I used to practice on pillows when I was learning how to play. I haven't practiced on a pillow in 30 years, maybe. Yeah, 30 years. But I used to practice on it all the time and go through the rudiments, playing them very slow first because, pillows have no rebound. And that's the concept, practice on something that has no rebound. So therefore, when you practice or when you play something that have rebound, now your hands are moving faster than your limbs can take them.
right.
And that was Buddy Rich's secret, his foot technique is, he had such great feet technique because he used to tap dance. He was a professional tap dancer, as far as I'm concerned. So his ankles were magnificent, He had great technique.
And also the other thing too, I would imagine, is that 10,000 hours thing. If you put in so much time ahead of time preparing,
Yeah.
then you are ready.
Yeah. Well, it's just like the old saying. It's like if you're a bike rider, if you know how to ride a bike, you don't need to practice to ride a bike. Same thing with the drums, or same thing with an instrument. Maybe piano may be different, or guitar may be different because now it's finger things you got to worry about, constantly moving and making sure like you got the right fingering and make sure the fingering it lands in the right place. That it could be a little different, but drums no.
Interesting.
So now, and I've always been a strong believer in, even when I was going through my practice phase, just try to be honest with yourself and not work on the things that work on the things that you don't know, or try to build up the things that you're weak in. Work those things out. That way it keeps your mind going and it keeps you fresh.
Right, because the other stuff is already built in your memory anyway, right?
Yeah, because I've gonna watch other guys play. Not a lot of them, but I've watched some guys play, and you could tell what they, when you sit down and listen to them, you can tell exactly what they do when they go home and practice. Practice on a lot of chops, but when it comes to playing music, and then they sit there and play music, and some of the stuff works, and then all of a sudden, something hit them in the head, like a concept of a rhythm, and then they get frustrated because they can't figure out how to play it because they worked on this one thing, when they went home, the whole time just working on this one thing instead of just sitting down and just play what you feel and play what you hear every time you sit down and play. That's why you see somebody like Gary Husband. I don't know if you know him.
Yes, of course.
Gary Husband, he's one of those kind of guys. He's just when he sits down and play, what comes out of him, it comes out of him at that moment.
Sure.
And it's always some beautiful moments.
Yeah, I guess paying less attention to like just being a technical player, although you are very technical. I mean, what you play on the drums and what you're able to do is very technical. But you're playing it as strictly. You're coming from a purely musical point of view. Yeah, that makes sense. And then that leads me to the other question. How someone who has watched you over the years and said, "Oh man, I want to play like Dennis Chambers." Not the one, I don't want to be Dennis Chambers, but that is inspiring, that kind of playing. So what would you suggest to that student to do to come up with that capacity or work towards your approach at playing?
Well, first of all, I've always tell people, like, you don't want to be Dennis Chambers. You don't want to play like Dennis Chambers. You want to play like yourself. Just be yourself, and you'll be okay. I mentioned this at some of the clinics I've done here, or the classes I've done here. It's like, when your feet hit the floor for the first time in the morning, sit there for a second and connect with yourself and just ask yourself how you feel, what you're doing, and listen to your body and see what you feel, and try to put that to the drums. Or when you pick up a pair of sticks for the first time during the day, play what you feel.
Right. Rather than trying to be.
And rather than play, sitting there trying to play, like, wait a minute, I remember this thing Tony Williams did, and then you try to go for that. And the thing is, and even if you do that, like Billy, Tony, you play what inspired you to do that, the thing that caught your ear, but don't stop there. Try to put yourself in this position like, well, if I came up with this idea of that same concept, what would my thoughts or what would my feeling be on that?
Sure.
Fish around.
Yeah, and then so who are your inspiration?
Billy Cobham, Tony Williams, Jack DeJohnette, Lenny White, David Garibaldi, Steve Gadd, Vinnie Colaiuta, Clyde Stubblefield. It's a whole long list. Anybody it's like this for me. Anybody and everybody that have something to say on that instrument, my ears are open. Flo, Monnier, Canada. The guy's phenomenal. We were just sitting there looking at some videos of him playing on YouTube. Jeff Tain Watts,
Right. Yeah.
Marvin Smitty Smith. The list just goes on and on and on. Chris Daddy Dave,
So it's major. But the first one was, Tony. A lot of people have gotten that influence, and I guess it's anybody who shows you a new idea that you heard.
Even John Blackwell.
Yeah.
Check him out. And he's got something to say.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, but you're absolutely right, because you start with a few people that you know, and then others around you are always doing something that not influence, but at least you take in, because they're doing something a little bit different there. That's why they get somebody's attention.
Well, that was the concept back then. Nowadays, it's not the same. For instance, they got this thing called the gospel chops now, and I can't tell who's who now, because they all sound the same, pretty much. For me, that's just my ears, and I could be wrong. I don't know, but they just sound the same to me. And it's when you have category drummers that are put in categories or put in boxes, Billy Cobham, Alphonse Mouzon, Lenny White, drummers of that stature. They were known as fusion players, and myself including. Part of that is fusion, and then you had your funk players, then you had your rock players, then you had your. See, these are guys are put in boxes, right? So the fusion side of like some of the gospel chop things, or the guy who played gospel chops. What's the difference what they do than what Vinny does? or what he do, or what I do, or what Billy Cobham do. But we're known as fusion players, or me as a fusion funk player, not known too much as a jazz player, which I am. I'm first that, foremost. Somewhat, anyway. In my mind, I like to think so. But, like now they got this new category, is, gospel chops. And I'd sit there and listen to them and go like, and some of the comments that they make here go like, somebody asked, like, well, who did you, listen to, and this, that, da, da, da. And they all say the same thing. Well, I don't listen to, I don't listen to anybody. I just picked up a pair of sticks and I just practiced, and this is what came out. Like, well, wait a minute. Now, how is it that you pick up a pair of sticks and this is what came out of you, and you sound like Vinnie Colaiuta?
Right.
I mean, I didn't pick
Obviously,
up a pair.
he must have heard.
Well,
Vinnie,
but still, you were influenced.
Of course.
I mean, it's like when you turn the TV on or when you go to a movie theater, there's music. So, and whatever you do in life, whether you become a doctor, lawyer, a mechanic, a drug dealer, whatever, somebody had to inspire you to do that. But don't sit there and say like, well, I didn't listen to anybody and I just, this is all my stuff. Man, there's nothing new, under the sun. I'm Dennis Chambers, and I'll be proudly to say, yeah, I borrowed and ripped off a lot of, Lenny White, Billy Cobham, Tony Williams, Jack, I've ripped them all off. But the thing that makes me a little different in my mind is I play it the way I feel it. I didn't like just blatantly just rip them off and, when I play, you go, oh yeah, that's Billy Cobham. Oh yeah, that's Tony Williams. Oh yeah, that's Dave Weckl. Oh yeah, that's no. It's like for me, it's like I create somewhat like a style and a sound of my own.
Right. And ultimately, that's really important because you can be a machine or just fulfill somebody's need. If you're playing on a pop record, you have to sound a certain way. But then when you have the possibility to stretch out and improvise, just like having a conversation, you've learned the language. Now you speak according to where you're from, your culture, your thoughts, what you've read. Same thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, and that's why somebody like Steve Gadd, for instance. Steve Gadd is like one of the greatest drummers of our time. I mean, the guy played with everybody from A to Z. I mean, recorded with everybody from A to Z. That's that. I can't think of one artist he haven't played with. Important artist, that is. And some unimportant artists he played with. And a lot of people don't know that he played on some things that some of the disco hits too. So I mean, the guy he's a very interesting player. And I was sitting there in a class yesterday, I think, and day before yesterday, and there was this one thing that bothered me that he played. It was an inverted paradiddle with the bass drum playing a samba bass drum beat, and it took me a week to figure it out because I refused to believe it was a paradiddle. And come to find out, after all those hours later, back to square one, it was an inverted paradiddle. I wanted to cuss him out so bad, man. Like, but only he can think of that kind of stuff, You know what? I mean, the he's a genius,
Absolutely.
And a lot of people don't know. Yeah, Peter Erskine is one of those kind of guys. I like people like like Peter and Gadd and Harvey and those kind of guys where you can just drop them in any kind of musical setting, and it sound like they wrote the piece. Gadd is like that, definitely. He's like a chameleon of music. Peter Erskine, a lot of people don't know, he's like that.
Well, sure. He was Maynard Ferguson, Weather Report, Boss Gags. I mean, on and on. And he's done it all.
And then, like living in New York, he played on a lot of stuff people don't know about too. I remember this one record he did with Bob James, and I can't remember the title of the record. I brought the record because I thought it was Steve Gadd and Marcus Miller. I thought it was those two guys playing on it. And I bought the record, and I read the credits, and I'm like, Peter Erskine and Will Lee, wait a minute. They made a mistake. They made a mistake. And then I checked into it. Sure enough, it was those two guys. It was the music was, it was just very relaxed. It was very beautiful. Peter played everything, like right to the T. when you listen to a piece of music and you sit there and go like, well, I couldn't have done it. I could not have done that any better.
Right. No, that's it. Having such musical vocabulary,
Yeah.
and then putting your stamp on it. Your stamp, because you're speaking it. I mean, you're in that conversation. Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. Thank you so much, Dennis. It's a real pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to do this interview.
Well, thank you, and like I said, thank you for having me here, man. Hopefully, I get a chance to get back here.
Yeah, with pleasure.
All right.
Thank you.